Portsmouth Public Media and Center for Wildlife proudly bring to you Creature Feature.
Hey ladies and gentlemen, Alexis here with PPM TV and Bob with the Center for Wildlife, but more importantly than either one of us is Bob's good friend Henry. So quick heads up, the Center for Wildlife is here in Cape Nettic, Maine, and the Center for Wildlife focuses on rescue and rehabilitation. The friend we're meeting today, Henry, here on our Creature Feature, is here because he has been rescued. And Bob was just telling us before the camera started rolling a little bit about Henry's rescue and the fact that he is imprinted on humans. Tell us a little bit more about Henry's experience imprinting and why it is so critical that if we do find a friend in the wild who needs our help, that we find a licensed center.
That's right. Yeah, so Henry here, he's part of our ambassador team. All of our ambassador animals here at the center are all animals that will live out the rest of their lives with us because of their inability to survive in the wild. So Henry, he is one of a number of ambassadors that live with us here at the center that are what we call imprinted on humans. So this is one of those more unforeseen issues that kind of decreases the rate of successful survival in the wild for some animals, usually due to juvenile animals being brought into someone's home and being kept in the home, usually being hand-fed prior to them coming to a facility like ours, which was the case for Henry here. He was found as a tiny little porcupine, they're called, when they're little babies. Porcupines here, they're about the size of a grapefruit when they're first born. He was found at the base of a tree. So porcupines, they are actually born with all 30,000 of these quills that they have, believe it or not. Luckily for mom, those quills are nice and soft when they're first born, and then they harden up within a few hours of birth. So they're able to protect themselves pretty much from day one. So our porcupines in the wild, mom will actually spend a lot of the part of the day away from the youngsters as to not attract predators to their babies, which was probably the case for Henry. Mom was probably just up in the tree canopy nearby foraging when Henry was found at the base of a tree and was believed to have been orphaned. He was then unfortunately taken into someone's home and he was being fed by those rescuers before coming to us. And in that time period, it was just enough time for Henry, as a juvenile, to start associating humans with food, to start to see his rescuers as Mama and Papa. So by the time he came to us, he was very far, again, what we call imprinted on humans. So when he came to us, we had him in one of our outdoor enclosures. We were hoping that he was going to be releasable. But anytime our volunteers or our staff would go in to drop food for Henry, they were greeted at the door by Henry, who would even help open the door for them to bring his food in. So from very early on, it was clear that he was very much associating humans with food, to the point where he would start following staff and volunteers around. We did try and go through what we call kind of a rewilding process, making some loud, kind of scary noises, trying to be big, intimidating humans. Yeah. Again, just greeted by Henry looking up, begging for some food. So it was very clear that at that point, Henry unfortunately would not be able to survive in the wild. The thing we try and pass on to animals is that we humans are predators to them. So if an animal does not have that natural wariness of humans, it could show that they are potentially imprinted at that point. So Henry here, if we were to release him, he would just end up on someone's doorstep. It's not just reserved for his caretakers. He would go up to anyone and everyone and start begging for food, which obviously poses an issue if he were to be out and about.
Now, he lives here, of course, because he's imprinted and lives here permanently and is one of your probably most popular ambassadors.
Without a doubt.
He is very friendly and willing to meet people. So Bob was saying, when you're coming for the tour, if you're taking a tour, you can book a private tour, a group tour. There are visiting hours Thursday through Sunday. Of course, call ahead or hop on the website for all of those details. But you can come and meet Henry and sit with him. Bob would, of course, be here with you, but sit with him and visit with him and watch him eat, as we have the gift of doing today. Now, we've had the gift, of course, I have been over to Henry's enclosure, so I know where Henry lives, and Bob isn't kidding. He really, you can see the imprinting. He's very willing for Bob to open the door, close the door. There's an amazing innate communication. Now, how old is Henry, and how long has he been with you?
So Henry is turning 8 years old this year, which is actually, for a captive North American porcupine, still relatively young. The oldest captive North American porcupine on record just passed away at the Museum of Science in Boston last year, actually, and I believe he or she was around 32 years old, I believe.
32?
Yeah, pretty incredible. So we're hopeful that Henry will be with us for a while longer, because, as you mentioned, he very much is kind of the star of the show. He's got his own fan following. We do some Facebook Lives on Friday with
Yes,
Henry.
I've seen that.
You can tune in, and we take Henry out on little foraging walks, or we just spend some time in his enclosure with him. So he's definitely one of the stars of the show, and is a great ambassador, especially for some of those private experiences. If you're looking to book one of those in with us, just getting to spend some time this close to an animal like Henry, like a North American porcupine here, is a pretty special experience.
It is.
These guys are primarily nocturnal animals. We do, see them quite a bit out and about during the day, but they're most commonly out at nighttime. So to get to spend some nice, comfortable, and safe time with an animal, especially of his species, this close, is a very special experience.
Now, mentioning that he's an ambassador, you can figuratively adopt an ambassador with an easy donation. I say easy, which is, of course, is a matter of perspective. But the average, was I seeing that it was about $25 to support
That's
an
right.
ambassador?
Yeah, so we call it our Adopt an Ambassador program. You're not physically adopting
Sure.
one of the ambassadors, which has been a point of miscommunication in the past. I've had to explain to people that you will not physically be taking any of the animals home.
Somehow I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it is just a sponsorship of their care for up to a year. So for $25 you can donate. All the information is right on our website. We have a full list of all of our ambassador animals, especially for people that make a very deep connection with specific ambassadors during an experience here. We luckily have a lot of folks that will go on and sponsor their care for the year. We do send a little package in the mail. You get a photo of the ambassador who you're adopting, some species information, a little signed certificate, and some additional little materials in that package. But it's a great way to give back to our animal friends here. A lot goes into the caretaking of these animals. You can see this little platter right here, which is a healthier salad than I usually eat on a daily basis, is a meal that Henry gets fed every single day.
Wow.
And we currently have a team of 28 ambassadors that are being fed on a daily basis.
Oh my goodness.
So we go through a lot of materials throughout the year to care for these animals. So that really simple donation of $25 actually goes a very long way for caring for our ambassador friends here. And it's a cool way to make, again, a little deeper connection with one of the ambassadors.
Now, $25 may not necessarily be reasonable for everyone watching our show. So please, give what you can. You may not be able to sponsor an animal, but if you have a few dollars, you can hop on the website and you can send that over to them. Every dollar counts. And on that note, I'd like to remind everyone watching, ourselves included, it's important that we think about the fact that the Center for Wildlife exists and is supported solely by our dollars. They do not get any government funding. So it is because of people like you and I, the people behind the scenes, people like Bob, people that visit the center, that they are able to help friends like Henry. Once again, all dollars help. Any amount helps. Another great way to support the Center for Wildlife is your Amazon wish list.
That's right. Yeah, we like we just mentioned with the caretaking of not just of our ambassadors, but on our medical clinic side, there are years where we can take in anywhere up to and exceeding 2,500 animals over the course of a calendar year on our medical clinic side. So we're talking about a lot of material needs to caretake for all of these animals. So even just something as simple as looking at our little Amazon wish list, you can either buy directly through and ship to us directly through the Amazon wish list, or you can even just have a look on there and drop some materials off in person. We luckily have a very supportive community around here. We've got some great friends that own a whole bunch of blueberry bushes, and some individuals will bring big bags of frozen blueberries to us, which all goes directly to the feeding of our animals, our ambassadors, and in the medical clinic. So if there's any questions about, some other materials we could use, food as well, you can always give our hotline a call, or
Okay.
again, looking at that Amazon wish list.
We've done that. My husband and I, a few years ago, I'm dating myself, a few years ago, more than a few, back before they were in this big, beautiful, new, wonderful facility, and they were over at their original location, which is just a little bit up the road here. We were bringing over sweet potatoes, and we'd go to the
Awesome.
local Hannafords and just get bags and bags of food to drop off. So that is absolutely something. If you're a local and you're in the area, or you just want a fun little summer thing to do, or any time of year thing to do, stop by the grocery store while you're there. Pick up a few extra sweet potatoes. Call ahead, find out what they like. We know that everybody likes blueberries.
That's right.
Now, what is Henry having today? You said he eats this every day, and I hear him making a few noises.
Yeah. So this is Henry's daily platter that he has here. We do change it up to make sure that he's getting a nice variety of vitamins and nutrients. But our North American porcupines, they're strictly herbivorous, so they're
Okay.
only eating some plant materials. So he's got a bit of a variety in here. He usually has a base of leafy greens. Today he has some carrot, his personal favorite, the sweet potato, some zucchini, mushroom, rodent chow, which is a commercially developed vitamin and nutrient-packed little pellet for our rodents. And then he's got some acorns as well, which is usually between the sweet potato and the acorns he switches for his favorites. Today seemed like the acorns first, and then he's working his way through the rest. But these guys are strictly herbivores, so when they're out and about in the wild, they're just foraging for natural browse. They can eat a variety of different items, spring and summer, obviously, with a whole bunch of vegetative growth popping up all over the place. And then a little bit more of a restricted diet in the winter time, obviously, when some of that greenery is less available. They'll switch over to actually eating some of our conifers, some of our evergreens, and they can even use those incredibly sharp, large rodent teeth and those big old claws they have there to forage on tree bark as well.
Wow. Now they climb.
They can, yeah. So they are incredible climbers. You might be able to see Henry. He's got some big claws on his hands and his feet. So they are relatively what we call arboreal, spending a lot of time up in the tree canopy. So if you're walking around in an area where you know there may be some porcupines around, always take a look up in the tree canopy. You may see a porcupine shockingly high up in a tree sometimes. They're pretty adventurous with their climbing. I've seen some porcupines in our surrounding area around here incredibly high up, incredibly far out on some branches, foraging for some hemlock branches as well. They particularly love hemlock in the wintertime. But these guys, they will also chew away at the base of trees. They're going for the inner layer, which is called the cambium layer of tree bark, which is just underneath the outer, thicker layer. It's packed full of vitamins and nutrients. It's how a tree passes nutrients throughout from the root systems up. So they're going for that nice, softer, tissuey cambium layer. But to do so, they have to chew away that outer layer of bark, which unfortunately can be fatal for some trees as they are feeding, which gives these guys a little bit of a bad rap and a bad reputation for some property owners if they have porcupines around eating some of those trees, again, unfortunately being fatal for some of those trees with that chewing. But before we came around, one thing that these guys actually did is almost a natural form of sustainable forestry practice. By thinning the tree canopy, they were promoting the growth and regenerative growth in the forest, which creates a happier and healthier forest ecosystem, which is something that we actually do now as humans as an ecological forestry practice, thinning tree cover to create regenerative growth. These guys were playing that entire role for our local ecosystems before we started doing that.
We're stealing their job.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you mentioned that when he's in the wild, he's foraging. He obviously doesn't have the gift of kale and sweet potatoes. How do you discover that the favorite foods that he loves while living in captivity versus what he might be foraging for?
Right. So we provide this platter with him for him. We bring it into his enclosure on a daily basis. But what we'll also do throughout the different seasons is we take Henry on foraging walks, we call them.
Of course.
Where Henry will just walk out into the forest. We just have to follow along, usually equipped with a piece of sweet potato to entice him to come back to his enclosure. But we'll just walk around with Henry and watch what he's naturally foraging on around here. So in the kind of late spring into summer, the beech buds, as they start flowering out and leafing out, He loves the beech trees, but every season his diet very naturally changes with what our wild friends would be foraging on. So taking him on those foraging walks, it allows us to just see what he's eating, and then we'll sustainably harvest some of those browse from the area around here. We'll collect from elsewhere as well, and we'll put those in his enclosure so that throughout the day he can also naturally forage on some of those browse in his enclosure.
That makes perfect sense. Now, you mentioned he's about 8. Do they, coming back to general porcupine facts, we don't know if he's bred, but how old would they begin making new porcupets?
Yeah, so they can start breeding significantly younger than like our reptile friends that we were meeting earlier today. Whereas those reptiles, they're not reaching that sexual maturity until their teen years. These guys are usually reproducing within their first couple years, actually. So they'll start a little bit earlier on. Mom's usually only raising one little porcupet at a time that's making it to adulthood.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Limited number.
Yeah, so luckily we have a very stable population of them throughout New England. There aren't too many threats. Obviously, destruction of habitat fragmentation is an issue, but especially right here in the Mount Agamenticus area, we have a abundant population of porcupines. So if you're ever interested in seeing some wild porcupines, highly recommend hitting the trails around here, right next door to us with our friends at the Mount Agamenticus Conservation Region. You can go right up to the summit. There's a whole bunch of families that breed right up there at the summit as well. One of the important things—
They hide well.
They do. Our friends up at the summit of Mount A have become very habituated with human contact. So we always like to tell people that as comfortable as they may be with us, it is very important if we're interacting with any wild animals that we keep a nice safe distance.
And don't feed.
And do
Don't
not feed
feed.
them. Yeah. Feeding wildlife obviously can be a huge issue, like we talked about with Henry's story. Creating that habituation with human contact, with humans being a source of food, can cause a lot of issues where, they may be comfortable with us. Some other landowners, some other property owners may not be as comfortable as with those animals. So if those animals start seeking out those people, it could cause some conflicts as well. So it's important just to keep in mind that these guys, they do well enough on their own in the wild, with the exception of instances of being injured or orphaned and bringing them to a facility like ours. We definitely want to try and keep our distance.
And how many porcupines do you see each year? Now, again, let me segue back and say, ladies and gentlemen, even though as adorable as Henry is, as wonderful as the friends that we get to meet are, CFW, Center for Wildlife, is a rescue and rehabilitation effort. That's all they do. These are not pets. They're wild animals. Henry, again, as we've learned, is not releasable. So when we think about how you see thousands of animals each year. If I remember, you see upwards of 2,500 animals a year.
Yeah.
Now, because they are so friendly with humans, especially in this particular area, do you see a lot of porcupines?
There is a decent amount of human-porcupine conflict that we run into, primarily through our medical clinic. The reasons that porcupines are coming to us is kind of across the board with all of our animals. Unfortunately, car collisions is a very big one. Being a nocturnal species, they are a relatively slow animal as well. They kind of have a lumbering gait. Because of all those quills, they've adapted to learning that they don't really have to worry about many other predators out there. So they generally take their time. And unfortunately, they're kind of dark, out at nighttime, unfortunately, being hit by cars in the evening hours. But they do also and can contract some mammalian diseases, viruses as well. We've actually have been on the front line in our region to sue some new emergent diseases that have been seen in local porcupine populations that have jumped species. One of the big ones is skunkadena virus, which was previously only historically seen in skunks, has hopped over to our porcupines, as we were kind of like right on the front line of recognizing and helping sort of shine a little bit of light on that jump. Obviously, being a mammal, mange is kind of a constant issue that some of them struggle with as well. So there's a pretty wide variety of issues that can arise when porcupines come to us. And there are sometimes that we will see dozens of them over the course of a year. So they're definitely one of our more common mammalian species that we'll see in our medical clinic.
Now, when do they have quills all along from the time that they're porcupets?
That's
Are
right.
they
Yeah.
that defense is always there?
Yeah, so they're born with them, but then they harden up within a few
I
hours.
see.
Yeah.
And now I understand this is a myth. Maybe you can dispel this or you can confirm it. They don't actually throw their quills.
That's correct.
Okay.
They do not have the ability to shoot or
That's
throw
just
their
a
quills.
cartoon.
That's right. So their quills are a modified hair follicle. So those quills are attached to Henry just like our hairs are attached to our head. So when an animal is quilled, it is usually because that animal is attacking a porcupine. They can stand those quills up on end, and it's usually when the impact, those quills are barbed, so they dig their way in, and when that animal pulls away, those quills come undone.
Ooh.
It's not a pleasant situation for
Anybody,
involved,
sure.
the predator, and then also for Henry, it'd be like taking a chunk of our hair and ripping a chunk of our hair out. And then obviously it's their natural defense, and they don't want to lose those quills either, so yeah.
And I heard you speaking earlier about him changing his colors through the winter, or because spring is coming.
Yeah, so you can see right now he is kind of on the tail end of his big, thick winter coat.
Yeah.
So being a mammal species, an
Floofy.
active mammal species that's out all winter long, they grow out a nice thick winter coat like a lot of our other mammal friends. And then as we come into the spring, as it starts to warm up, he'll start to shed that coat, so it almost gives the look of a change of coloration. That change of coloration is really just more of the visibility of his quills outside that are kind of tucked underneath that big, thick winter coat that he has on right now.
Now, is he a particular type of porcupine?
North American porcupine.
Okay, how many types of porcupines are there?
So there's a variety found worldwide. Some incredibly cute porcupine species found worldwide. We've got a few that are in South America. We've got some African species as well, porcupine. But throughout North America, we have the North American porcupine.
Ah, so they're all Henrys.
Yeah,
Here in
that's
North
right.
America, they're all versions of Henry. And does he vocalizes? I know when we came over, he was making a little bit of a noise, which, ladies and gents, I don't know if we're going to get a chance to capture that for you. But what does that mean? Is he feeling anxious? Is there a separate maybe mating call? What do they talk about?
Obviously, there's a little bit of a difference between the vocalizations of a wild porcupine versus Henry here when he's out and about chatting with us. With us, it's usually Henry communicating that he is ready for some snacks. As you can see right now, he's finished his platter and he's already searching for some more snacks here. So Henry vocalizing is usually him looking for food. But he's got a variety of calls that he'll do with his caretakers. Some of them are kind of these little affectionate calls, these little
personal.
Yeah, kind of personal communications that he'll do. He definitely has some calls that can show some signs of stress. When I have to entice him back into his carrier, he'll probably talk to me, letting me know that he's not particularly interested right now in going back in. So yeah, there's a variety. But in the wild, yep, they have mating calls that they'll do, interpersonal communications between individuals, and then some distress calling that they can do as well.
Now he's appears to be a bit of a lumberer, but could he pick up the pace if he needed to?
They can move if they really need to, but they sort of have this kind of slow gait. Again, you know, having all of those quills, there aren't too many predators that they need to worry about. The actual only predator species that they really need to worry about in this region is the fisher. So yeah, he's going to probably come right up. We just want to make sure that we're keeping our hands away from him. He does actually give a little bit of little affectionate nibbles.
I love it.
But for our porcupines, they have very, very large teeth in which they can give those affectionate nibbles, and it can inflict a little bit of damage. But
it's everything I can do right now not to pick him up and squeeze him.
So he's really showing off right now that these guys, yeah, you'll just want to keep your fingers away
Oh,
from
but I
his
don't,
face.
though. I don't want
Yeah,
to, Bob. I don't want to.
You'll see right now, he's really showing off right now. The strongest sense for our porcupines is their sense of smell. So they are pretty much fully scent driven. So Henry, he is going to spend some time going around now that he's finished his food, and he will smell every possible scent hanging around our amphitheater here.
Boy, no fear. Well, which is not necessarily a good thing, keeping in mind. So, ladies and gentlemen, you'll notice that Bob asked me to withhold, not to not touch him. And it is important to remind ourselves and to keep in mind when you're here, when you are visiting, we can't snuggle them as much as we want to. I know I want to too. I want to give him some little scritches on his cheeks. We can't touch the animals. They are here for rescue and rehabilitation. Even though they are here permanently, they are still deemed wild animals, and we cannot interact physically with them. It's very important to remind ourselves, of course, as adults, but in particular to remind children who visit. I'm sure that that must be a tough one for kids when they visit and meet a friend like Henry, to keep their hands to themselves.
Yeah, so this is definitely kind of a special interaction with Henry here. Usually when we're doing any of these meet and greets, we have a nice, physical barrier between ourselves and the animals. Even us caretakers, we minimize any of our physical contact with the animals outside of doing physical checks with them. Just again, these are wild animals. We really, try and differentiate ourselves in educating that these guys are wild animals and having that healthy barriered relationship with wild animals. It can be really, really tempting to try and snuggle them, to try and coddle them. But again, the more you're doing that, the more you're just creating that habituation with human contact to the point where it can reach an unhealthy point. And our public, the public outreach that we try and do is that these guys are wild animals. We want wild animals to be out in the wild. We don't want to have that really physical contact with them. So in every point of our education, we try and make that a point, even just subtly, by not overhandling them ourselves in front of the public.
Lead by example.
Yeah.
And it isn't just keeping wild animals wild, ladies and gents. It's also, we can avoid getting hurt ourselves. We couldn't see Henry's teeth today, but I'm sure that even if he were just to nibble out of curiosity, boy, that might break the skin. And of course, that would be even more of more traumatic for young children, or for children of any age, myself included. But it's not just for their safety, but also for our safety. We want to keep them wild. We are domesticated, they are wild. And hopefully we can keep that line drawn. And keep in mind, you can sponsor all of the ambassadors here at the center. Hop on the website, take a look at the calendar. The warm weather's coming, so all sorts of events are coming our way. You can schedule group tours, private tours. They are looking to educate. That's what they're here to do. And if you haven't yet been by, well, there's a reason for that. They have a very well concealed entryway. So if you've driven up past Mount Agamenticus, I bet you've gone right by the Center for Wildlife entrance, and since they've done their job, you probably didn't even know. But again, they're open for visitation Thursday through Sunday, or by appointment for other days if you're looking for a tour. Once again, put that, if I mentioned it before, I'm sure you've heard me say it, but if I haven't said it yet today with Henry, put that phone number in your phone. Get the Center for Wildlife hotline number into your cell phone, not just in case of an emergency, but you never know. You might have a question. For example, if you were to, heaven forbid, run into a porcupine, like Henry, one of Henry's friends out in the wild, what not to do. For example, a towel could present an issue with all of those quills. So let us know before we let Bob and Henry go back, because I know Henry's back here looking for some more snacks and probably ready to head home. What are some of the things we should or shouldn't do? Heaven forbid we run into a friend of Henry's who does need help.
So, like you just mentioned, number one, call the hotline. We have a whole team
call
of
the
specialists
hotline
here whose job is to talk people through the process of potentially rescuing an animal. It can be pretty daunting, especially if you've never encountered a wild animal before. And then there's some really simple materials that you can either keep on you. I keep in my car a pair of nice thick gloves. You always want to make sure, and whenever possible, be gloved when interacting with any of these animals that you're attempting to rescue. And then usually something as simple as just a cardboard box is really all that you need.
Easy.
Get an animal into that box, trying to keep all the contact to a minimum, cutting down on that stress when you're transporting, trying not to talk to the animal. It's really tempting to try and say, "Oh, you're okay, buddy.
Yeah, it is.
I'm rescuing you. Don't worry." They have no idea that you're attempting to help them. So by talking to a wild animal, you're only stressing them out even more. So trying not to talk to them, keeping the radio off, keep them in a nice, quiet, dark space until you've brought them to a rescue like ourselves.
Excellent. Excellent information. Easy tips, easy things we can do. Gloves and a folded up cardboard box, things we can fit in the trunk of any car. That's hopefully a simple way to help. And again, call the center. And if they can't help you, they will refer you to someone who will. It's also important, before we let you go, that the Center for Wildlife, I want to share with you, the Center for Wildlife can't help just any wild animal. There are rules and restrictions and laws surrounding, that set the parameters, surrounding who they are and are not able to help. So if you're not sure, hop on the website. It gives you pretty much everything you could need to know, and then direct any further questions to the hotline. That's what they're there for. Once again, it isn't just for emergency, it's also for educational purposes. This is one of those moments where it's taking me everything I have not to rub his cheeks.
We'll see if we can get you a little sound of Henry's communication here. You gonna chat to us, buddy? No, he's being shy now. There he goes. All right, so yeah, we're probably gonna need to get him back into his carrier now. He's out of food here.
Henry's officially foraging. And just before we take off, what you're seeing here, Bob and I are sitting in the outdoor amphitheater, this beautiful, wonderful outdoor amphitheater here in Cape Nettic at the Center for Wildlife, where you can come into an owl symposium, all sorts of wonderful programs. So once again, the weather is warm. Hop on, see what they have to offer, and follow them on Facebook. You can see Henry every Friday on Facebook right here at the Center for Wildlife. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. As I like to say, it's because you're out there that we're in here. Thank you for keeping us on air. Remember, the Center for Wildlife is supported strictly and solely by private dollars. They do not receive grant funding. They could use our help. Do you have an extra dollar to spare? Hop on the website, send it their way. We know they need it. Thank you for keeping us out here, or us in here, and thank you for being out there. We'll see you again soon.